Hello and a very warm welcome to the launch of the Cricket Ireland Strategic Plan. It's taking place in virtual fashion, and I'm delighted to be joined by the CEO of Cricket Ireland, Warren Deutrom, who will take us through some of the highlights and the high points of the plan. Warren, you're very welcome to your own launch.
Thank you very much.
Tell me, the creation of a Cricket Island has a beautiful ring to it. That's the title of the strategic plan. Talk us through some of those highlights as you see it from the position of being author of it.
First of all, thank you for acknowledging the quality of the title. I can take no credit for it whatsoever. That's Craig Easdown, our media and marketing manager. I think the best ideas are often the simplest, and I think the concept of a Cricket Island is a very strong one. And I think it encapsulates what it is that we're trying to achieve, which is probably reclaiming a lot of the glories that we had for a sport that now goes back nearly 230 years in Ireland from its beginnings. And I think that depth and that early popularity, which, as many cricket fans will know, drove the sport to becoming the most popular sport in Ireland before the invention of the GAA, is what we want to try and reclaim over the next period, trying to become once again the sport that is played all the way throughout the island, and I guess trying to achieve our overarching vision for the sport, which is to make cricket mainstream. And if I'm going to try and capture the essence of what we're trying to achieve in one word, it's probably strengthening. Strengthening the foundations of the sport, particularly at club and at grassroots level, but also, I believe, strengthening in relation to women's and girls' sports. And probably the third element is strengthening ourselves as an organisation, as relatively newly minted full members of the International Cricket Council, trying to embed the structures, the systems and the processes to be a proper transitioned full member.
It is an ambitious plan, and we'll come through some of the specifics in that in a few moments. But it's also quite a short one. We're normally used to seeing a strategic plan which might run to 5 years or in extreme circumstances to 10 years. This one just brings us through to the end of 2023. What's the purpose behind that?
It's really a pragmatic decision, which is we're trying to align ourselves with the International Cricket Council's own funding cycle, which began in 2015, finishes in 2023. The new one is then going to be a 7-year cycle, 2024 to 31. So we're effectively looking at this plan, the Cricket Island, or creating a Cricket Island, as being the first stage of a 2-stage vision. The first is the 3 years, and then the next stage is the 7-year, 24 to 31. That 10-year period, 21 to 31, effectively being served to try and create making cricket mainstream. That's what we're trying to achieve.
It's exciting to be able to look towards that potentially additional funding, which will come through from the ICC as well, because any plan needs not only thought and imagination, but it also needs the investment on it. Looking at some of the specifics, and let's kick off on the playing side of the house. The Ireland men's team was the first Irish international team to be back in action last year in the midst of COVID. A fabulous victory, it must be said, over England in Southampton. But how challenging has it been to plan for the future on the field of play when there has been so little activity on the field of play?
In short, very difficult. We spend more of our time planning for things which unfortunately don't take place than we have planning for things which have taken place. However, that's kind of what we do, right? We're meant to be organising cricket matches, whether at home and abroad. So it is our purpose. And there's no point saying, well, let's not bother, either because it might not happen or because it's going to become too expensive. It's our purpose to put on matches at all levels. We have our provincial unions that work with our clubs. Cricket Ireland puts on the interprovincial competition, and also we put on our international competitions. It was very difficult last year. I think if I was going to try and encapsulate it into a phrase, we were dealing with unknown unknowns last year, as Donald Rumsfeld famously said. This year, I think we can probably characterise them as known unknowns. In other words, We know the impact that COVID and the pandemic has on the business. We know the impact that it has on the sport. The unknown part is how it's going to impact this year. So I guess what would I regard as a win at the end of the year? If we could get all of our club cricket started, we can get our players back in training. In fact, I know they're back in training already in the north. If we can get them back in training in the south as soon as possible when the government roadmap permits that to happen. If we can get our clubs out playing matches, probably initially starting with 20 over cricket, then hopefully later in the season going to 50 over cricket, particularly given the information of the lack of transmission of COVID and or infection rates in cricket last year, which was, I can't think of a single case that I heard of. That was also the case at our domestic professional level, which is the Interpros and the Women's Super Series. And then, of course, the final cherry on the cake would be ensuring that we can run our international program this year as well. You might find it ridiculous to hear this from a CEO, but if I'm not worried about the money this year, I just want to get us out there playing cricket at all levels and for our sport to be visible.
And it is the foundation that you have to build in order to create the cream at the top. But just staying at the top for a moment, the ambition is that in each of the case for the men's and the women's teams, that the ambition is, and the plan by which the strategic plan will be judged, is that we will be qualifying for all of the major ICC tournaments. How close to that are we at the moment, do you think?
Well, we would have to believe that we have an excellent chance in all of those. And it's a chance that not just we create ourselves by ensuring that we have high-performing teams and qualifying for World Cups, but it's also through the advocacy that we do as a sport. Myself and in particular our chairman, Ross McCollum, sitting at the ICC table, advocating for more spaces at World Cups, more teams to be participating. And that's already happening. ICC made some exciting announcements recently about the number of teams that will be competing in women's international events in the next cycle, 23 to 31. And we're going to continue to advocate for that for men's as well. But that's kind of the bit that's nearly within our control. What's more within our control is obviously the international teams themselves. And we have, obviously, we're going to be competing in the T20 World Cup itself, the Men's T20 World Cup in India in October. We then have the same event, which is going to be taking place in Australia in October 22. And then we have the Men's 50 Over World Cup, which will probably be around the same time, October, November in 2023. So we've got three really huge opportunities to give ourselves visibility as a sport, and we know that our success has been very much built upon that team performing on the world stage. I also want to talk about the women. We're qualifying for the Women's World Cup. It's currently an 8-team event. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be a real challenge. I think this team would back their chances because we would never, no Irish team ever takes the field of play thinking they're not going to do it. So it would be ridiculous to rule out anything. But if you're going to ask me what probably the key strategic performance imperative would be for the senior women's team, it's to qualify for the ICC Women's Championship, which effectively is the Women's Future Tours programme, which is what it's called in the men's game, which is the calendar of matches, the schedule of matches played between all of the top teams. That is our number one performance objective for the women's international team. And if we could achieve that, that then opens up for us a huge array of possibilities about the women's team following then the route that the men's team has taken in terms of professionalism, systems, structures, possibility for the future, and of course, commercial attractiveness.
And it'll be nice for Ed Joyce to actually get the players together on the field of play since he was appointed as manager. There were green shoots in terms of some of the younger players coming through for the matches that were played over the course of COVID. Of course, they're coming through from a provincial stage, from the academy, still supported by Shapoorji Pallonji, but the club base from which all players will come through. Participation is one of the key pillars in the strategic plan. What is the measurable that you're going to put in place to actually get more kids picking up a cricket bat rather than a hurl, or maybe a cricket bat alongside a hurl?
Probably in a couple of areas. I don't think we can ever ignore the fact that we're launching this plan while the pandemic is still raging. And I said in my previous answer that one of the wins that we would have is simply just to get cricket played again. I would imagine outside of the big three sports, the one fear that many of the other sports had was our visibility, was our traction, was keeping hold of hard-earned gains developed over the years, which in visibility obviously mitigates against. So for us to be able to simply ensure that we can retain the same number of players, retain club membership, retain the visibility, involvement numbers. We're round about just shy of 50,000, about 49,500 in terms of our involvement numbers in the sport, of which 35,500 would be what we would characterise as involvement, which is people who don't necessarily play regularly but have tried the sport, are involved in its schools, etc., etc. 15,000 would be regular weekend cricketers. So those are numbers that we want to retain. We'd like to add to those numbers by about 10% at least. As I said, it's a fairly short plan. We're doing it in the wake of COVID. So I would regard even maintaining our numbers in the wake of that attrition and that context, I think would be a real win. How are we going to try and do it? We're going to be launching 2 or 3 fairly exciting mass participation plans in the coming 2 to 3 weeks. I'm not going to give them away here. We'll give them the due prominence. One of them is going to be very much specifically focused on girls at the 9 to 13 age range. We're also going to be focusing on schools as well. So those are 2 clear elements. And I think the third one I want to draw attention to is our continued support and investment in the provincial unions. We embarked upon this process back in 2013, really upon the launch of the interprovincial structure, that it really shone a light on our need to be able to support and provide increased capacity to the provincial unions to be able to provide additional support to the club game. How do we do that? We put in place funding for staff, for offices, and for programmes, notwithstanding, of course, us pretty much carrying the majority of the cost for the Interpro structure itself. So we're kind of invisible in this. What do you do for the clubs? Well, what we're doing is we believe in good administration. We believe in good governance as a means to properly support the sport. And that's what we've been trying to do over the last number of years, putting in the best part of €1 million a year to fund those structures. It's so important to do. We're only going to continue building that.
So you'll have the right people in place. You'll have the right programmes in place. Hopefully you'll have public health back to a position whereby we can put all of those in place. We won't hold you to having the sunshine, which of course is a key element to getting people out playing as well in cricket. The last element of that, and the 4th pillar within the strategic plan, is on the places to play. And we've seen the benefits to be drawn from the national centre out in the national sports campus. But there are still plans to put a national stadium out there as well. And you've actually outlined those in quite some detail. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, we have. So at this stage, we're working very closely with Sport Ireland and with the government about ensuring that our national stadium can be at the national sports campus in Abbottstown. That is very much dependent upon it. We're only one small piece of the jigsaw. Well, we hope it's not going to be that small, but it's going to be a piece of the broader sporting jigsaw, which is part of the sports campus's master plan. That master plan needs to be approved by the government, and we understand that is actually happening now. So I don't mean today, but it's within the ambit of being approved. So that's going to be a very, very key piece of infrastructure for us. The other thing that we can do is to provide supports for clubs and for unions to be able to understand how best to access government funding, whether it be the sports capital grants, the equivalent grants in Northern Ireland as well, by working closely with our unions and with our clubs. So it's not going to be Cricket Ireland necessarily sticking hundreds of thousands and millions in to say, here's some funding to support bricks and mortar. But I shouldn't ignore the fact as well, we launched our club fund back in 2017 or 2018. What we've done is a more pragmatic approach in 2020, which we're likely to repeat in 21, which is how can we best assist clubs to get restarted again? So particularly in the wake of the pandemic, what we're doing is providing funding for PPE and funding for signage to assist clubs simply to be able to restart again, to make it easier for them to do so. There's one piece of the jigsaw I also want to mention as well, which is about marketing, which is particularly in relation to the women's and girls game. We launched our webinar about On the Front Foot, which is about leadership in women's sport, trying to provide the heroes that we know in the cricket game and also in other sports to talk about how they became successful in their own field, and hopefully to inspire girls and women to involve themselves in the sport. But it's not just about participation and performance. It's about governance. It's about administration. It's also about marketing. So we're going to make sure this year, if in the past we've only live streamed 10 to 15 matches, maybe at international level, we're going to try now and escalate that or expand that rather, to make sure we can have as many as 40 and 50 matches live streamed this year. So it's about making sure if she can see it, she can be it. We can make sure that we're going to try and make it as visible as we can.
That's great. It's the role of any national governing body to govern, to organise, but also to inspire. And the plan, which now is available, is certainly capable of doing that. Thank you to all of you who have joined us today. You can download the full copy of the strategic plan on the Cricket Ireland website. For the moment, though, Warren Deutrom, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Rob.